Hey everyone, tonight we're stepping back in time, way back to an era where Yelp reviews didn't exist, and your biggest concern wasn't whether the Wi-Fi worked, but whether you'd wake up with all your teeth. Imagine this, you've been on the road for what feels like an eternity. The sun dipped below the horizon hours ago, painting the sky in bruised purples and exhausted grays. Your feet encased in well-worn, probably too thin leather ache with every step on the uneven, muddy track. The biting wind whispers through the skeletal trees, promising a truly miserable night under the stars. You're cold, you're hungry, and frankly, you smell a bit like a damp sheep. Just when you think you can't take another stride, a flickering, hazy glow pierces the oppressive darkness ahead. It's an inn, a beacon in the medieval night, promising warmth ale, and perhaps, just perhaps, a respite from the grueling journey. You probably won't survive this, but hey, at least you tried, right? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. And if you like what you hear, consider following the channel so you don't miss the next exciting parts of our journey. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As you draw closer, the faint glow resolves into the welcoming, if somewhat smoky illumination spilling from the inn's windows. The building itself is a sturdy timber-framed affair, 2 stories tall, its thatched roof a shaggy cap against the dark sky. A rough wooden sign creaking gently in the wind hangs above the door, its painted image perhaps a crudely rendered lion or a tankard of ale barely discernible in the dim light. You push open the heavy oak door, and a wave of sound and warmth washes over you, a sensory assault that is both jarring and incredibly comforting after the silent, frigid outdoors. The air inside is thick, a rich stew of wood smoke, roasted meats, unwashed bodies, and the distinct yeasty tang of ale. It's loud, a chaotic symphony of human voices, clinking tankards, and the occasional bray of a donkey from the stable yard outside. Your eyes, accustomed to the moonless night, struggle to adjust to the flickering light cast by rushlights and a roaring fire in a massive stone hearth. People are everywhere, a throng of humanity crammed shoulder to shoulder on benches and stools around rough-hewn wooden tables. Merchants with their weighty purses and weary expressions haggle over prices, while farmers, their hands gnarled from toil, share boisterous jokes and swig ale with gusto. A group of pilgrims, their scallop shells prominent on their cloaks, huddle together, murmuring prayers and sharing a meager meal. You even spot a traveling minstrel, his lute resting beside him, regaling a small captivated audience with a ballad of love and chivalry. It's a cross-section of medieval society, all crammed under one roof, seeking the same basic comforts you are. This common room, you realize, is more than just a place to eat and drink. It's the beating heart of the inn, a vibrant microcosm of the world outside. Historians still argue whether the medieval inn truly fostered social mobility or merely reflected existing class structures. But one thing is clear: for a few fleeting hours, everyone here shares the same space, bound by the universal need for warmth and sustenance. It's a bit like a medieval airport lounge, only with more bodily fluids and significantly less legroom. You take a moment, just a moment, to let the sheer overwhelmingness of it all wash over you. The roar of conversation, the clatter of plates, the occasional burst of raucous laughter. It's a living, breathing entity. Your nose, initially overwhelmed, starts to pick out individual scents: the sharp tang of onions, the sweetness of honey, the earthy smell of damp wool, and the ever-present aroma of wood smoke. This isn't the sanitized theme park version of history. This is the real deal, raw and unfiltered. And yet there's an undeniable allure to it, a primal comfort in being surrounded by others, even if they occasionally belch louder than a startled ox. One quirky tidbit about these places: medieval inns often had designated areas for different social classes, even in the common room. The high table near the fire was often reserved for wealthier guests, while poorer travelers might huddle by the door, trying to catch a stray spark of warmth. But tonight you're just trying to find a spot. Any spot where you won't be trampled by a drunken peasant or accidentally become part of someone's late-night arm wrestling match. Your stomach rumbles, a plaintive protest against the long journey, reminding you of your immediate priorities: warmth, food, and perhaps a pint of whatever passes for ale around here. The journey has been long, but the promise of an unexpected comfort beckons you further into the bustling heart of the inn. You shuffle deeper into the common room, the press of bodies surprisingly grounding after the isolation of the road. Your eyes dart around, taking in the scene. There's a group of merchants loudly haggling over prices for some unseen goods, their voices rising and falling in a rhythmic, almost musical cadence. Nearby, a grizzled old soldier, his face a roadmap of scars, nurses a tankard of ale. His gaze distant, lost perhaps in memories of long-forgotten battles. You try to weave through the throng without bumping into anyone, a task made challenging by the sheer number of people and the uneven flagstone floor. Someone laughs raucously, a booming sound that reverberates off the low smoke-blackened ceiling. You narrowly avoid stepping on a sleeping dog curled under a bench, its tail thumping a soft rhythm against the wood. It's an immersive, almost overwhelming experience, a far cry from the hushed tranquility of your usual bedtime routine. The sheer volume is astounding. Imagine trying to have a quiet conversation in a mosh pit and you're halfway there. There's the clatter of pewter tankards on tables, the sizzle and spit from the kitchen, the constant murmur of conversations, and the occasional burst of song, usually off-key and accompanied by clumsy stomping. Your ears are working overtime, trying to filter out the noise to make sense of the snippets of conversation that float by. You catch fragments about crop failures, a recent bandit attack on the King's Highway, and someone complaining about the price of wool. It's a living newspaper, a public forum where news and gossip spread faster than a plague in a crowded city. Historians still argue whether these common rooms were primary centers for political discourse or simply places for everyday chatter, but their role in information exchange is undeniable. You realize you're getting a crash course in local affairs just by standing here soaking it all in. Your nose, having adjusted somewhat to the initial blast, now begins to discern more specific scents. There's the smoky sweetness of roasting meat, perhaps pork or mutton, mingling with the sharp, almost vinegary smell of cheap ale. Underneath it all, a faint, lingering aroma of damp earth and unwashed bodies, a reminder of the inn's rustic setting and its clientele. It's not exactly a potpourri of roses and lavender, but there's a certain authenticity to it, a raw, honest smell that speaks of hard work and simple living. You might even detect a hint of horse manure wafting in from the stable, a constant reminder of the primary mode of transport in this era. It's a smell that strangely starts to feel less offensive and more natural. You think about that fancy scented candle you have back home, the one that claims to smell like crisp mountain air, and you chuckle. This, you decide, is the true smell of crisp medieval air. Finding a vacant spot proves to be a challenge. Every table seems to be occupied, every bench crammed. You consider standing, but your tired legs protest at the thought. Your gaze drifts towards the massive fireplace, its roaring flames casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. It seems to be the warmest, most inviting spot in the entire room, and naturally it's also the most crowded. People are huddled around it like moths to a flame, their faces bathed in the warm, flickering light. You watch as a man, his cloak dripping wet, extends his arms towards the blaze, steam rising from the fabric. It's a powerful magnet drawing everyone towards its comforting embrace. This is where the real warmth is, the true heart of the inn, and you instinctively start to gravitate towards it. The common room isn't just about food and drink, it's a social crucible. You see a traveling merchant attempting to sell a small, intricately carved wooden bird to a farmer's wife, who eyes it with a mixture of suspicion and fascination. In another corner, two men are engaged in a heated game of dice, their exclamations of triumph and despair echoing across the room. There's a tangible energy, a vibrant hum of human interaction that's both invigorating and slightly overwhelming. One quirky tidbit: sometimes if a traveling entertainer was particularly good, the innkeeper might offer them free lodging in exchange for their performance, saving both parties a bit of coin. It was a win-win, really, entertainment for the guests, a free bed for the performer, and slightly less noise for anyone trying to get a good night's sleep. As you finally spot a small gap near the edge of the fireplace, you realize that despite the chaos, there's an undeniable sense of community here, a shared experience that transcends the grime and the noise. You just need to find your own little pocket of it. You finally elbow your way towards the roaring-on fireplace, a true behemoth of rough-hewn stone dominating one end of the common room. The heat radiating from it is intense, a welcome embrace after the chill of the journey. You feel the dampness begin to seep from your cloak and clothes, almost immediately replaced by a delicious, pervasive warmth that starts to thaw your chilled bones from the inside out. It's more than just warmth, though. It's a beacon, a focal point around which all activity seems to orbit. People are drying their socks on small improvised hooks, their faces ruddy from the heat. A few travelers have even laid out small bedrolls nearby, planning to sleep as close to the comforting flames as possible, opting for warmth over a potentially questionable bed. The bonfire itself is a spectacle. Massive logs crackle and pop, sending showers of sparks dancing up the wide chimney. The flames are a vibrant orange and yellow, constantly shifting their light, painting the faces of those gathered around in an ever-changing tableau of light and shadow. You can smell the sweet, resinous scent of burning wood, a primal aroma that speaks of shelter and safety. It's mesmerizing, and you find yourself staring into the depths of the blaze, almost hypnotized by its raw power. This isn't just a utilitarian source of heat, it's the very heart of the inn, a silent, powerful presence that dictates the rhythm of the common room. Around the hearth, stories are being told, plans are being made, and friendships are perhaps being forged. You notice a group of travelers sharing a flask of something potent, their voices low and conspiratorial. A scullery maid, her face smudged with soot, pauses for a moment by the fire, warming her chilled hands before returning to her never-ending tasks. It's a universal comfort, this fire transcending social distinctions and bringing everyone into its shared glow. Historians still argue whether medieval inns prioritized the comfort of their guests or merely offered a basic necessity, but the prominence of the fireplace suggests a genuine understanding of a traveler's fundamental need for warmth. It's a small detail, but a significant one. You stretch out your numb fingers toward the flames, feeling the heat penetrate your skin, chasing away the last vestiges of cold. A sigh of pure contentment escapes your lips, a quiet sound lost in the general din of the room. This, you realize, is the unexpected comfort you sought. Not just the physical warmth, but the psychological solace of knowing you are safe indoors and among others. It's a feeling that's hard to articulate, a deep ancestral satisfaction that goes beyond simple shelter. You think about how easy it is to take central heating for granted in your own time, and you appreciate this roaring fire in a whole new, visceral way. You lean back against the rough stone of the fireplace, letting its warmth seep into your weary muscles. Your eyelids feel heavy, a pleasant drowsiness creeping in a stark contrast to the jittery alertness of the road. It's almost like a medieval spa. If a spa included 100 other people, the smell of sheep and the constant fear of stepping in something unspeakable. But right now, enveloped by the heat and the flickering light, none of that seems to matter. This fireplace is your sanctuary, your temporary haven from the harsh realities of the medieval world. One quirky tidbit: some inns would keep a pot simmering over the fire almost constantly, a perpetual stew or broth known as pottage, to offer cheap, hot sustenance to any traveler, regardless of their ability to pay for a full meal. It was a simple act of charity, or perhaps just good business, ensuring everyone got something warm in their belly. As the sounds of the common room begin to soften into a gentle hum around you, you close your eyes for a moment, just a moment, allowing the flickering warmth to lull you into a state of semi-awareness. With a contented sigh, you finally open your eyes, the warmth of the fire having worked its magic. Now, with your body somewhat thawed, the insistent pangs of hunger and thirst make their presence known. You push yourself away from the comfortable stone, the cacophony of the common room reasserting itself. Time to brave the bar, or rather the ale stand, which is more accurate. There's no polished counter or rows of gleaming bottles here. Instead, you approach a rough-hewn table presided over by a burly, red-faced man who is presumably the innkeeper, or at least a very large, very vocal member of his staff. He's drawing ale from a large wooden cask, the liquid gurgling noisily into a pewter tankard. You wait your turn, patiently observing the transactions around you. Most people are simply asking for ale. It's the staple, the lifeblood of the medieval traveler. There might be different strengths, perhaps a small ale for a lighter thirst or a stronger brew for those seeking a more profound escape from reality. You recall a historical tidbit: in medieval times, ale was often safer to drink than water, which was frequently contaminated. So everyone from children to adults drank it, albeit in varying strengths. It was less about getting tipsy and more about staying hydrated and healthy. You silently thank your lucky stars you're not risking dysentery with every sip. When it's your turn, you utter a simple, "Ale, please." The man nods, his movements practiced and efficient. He slams a brimming pewter tankard down in front of you, the foamy head almost spilling over the sides. You pay him with a few worn coins, pennies perhaps, or a silver groat if you're feeling particularly flush. The weight of the cold metal in your hand feels substantial, a tangible reward for your journey. You take a cautious sip. It's earthy, somewhat cloudy, and surprisingly potent, with a distinctly malty flavor. It's certainly not the crisp filtered lagers you're used to, but it's undeniably refreshing and instantly warming as it slides down your throat. Now for the food. Your eyes scan the room looking for signs of a menu, or at least an appetizing smell. The innkeeper gestures vaguely towards a table laden with various dishes, a veritable feast by medieval standards, though perhaps less appealing to your modern sensibilities. You see large loaves of coarse, dark bread, probably baked in the inn's own ovens. There are trenchers, thick slices of stale bread used as plates, piled high with chunks of roasted meat, likely venison, or perhaps a less exciting but more common mutton. A large steaming pot sits over a smaller fire in the corner, its contents a mystery until you get closer. You approach the food table, your stomach rumbling in anticipation. The options aren't extensive, but they are hearty. You opt for a generous portion of the roasted meat, pulling it apart with your fingers, and a sizable chunk of the dark bread. The bread is dense and chewy, perfect for soaking up any juices from the meat. The meat itself is a bit tough but flavorful, seasoned simply with salt and perhaps a few herbs. It's not gourmet dining, but after a day on the road, it tastes like a banquet. Historians still argue whether medieval inns offered a standard menu or simply whatever the cook had on hand, but improvisation was likely common. You also spot a bowl of what looks like vegetable pottage, a thick porridge-like stew made from whatever vegetables were in season, perhaps root vegetables like carrots and parsnips mixed with grains. You decide against it for now, prioritizing the more substantial meat. You take a bite of your bread, then a bite of meat, washing it down with another gulp of ale. The simple combination is incredibly satisfying, fueling your tired body and bringing a sense of grounded comfort. One quirky tidbit: medieval travelers often carried their own knives for eating, as cutlery was not always provided, and certainly not for every dish. So if you don't have one, you'll be using your fingers. A true hands-on dining experience. As you settle into a relatively unoccupied corner of the common room, you begin to observe the other patrons more closely, their stories silently unfolding around you. As you chew on your surprisingly satisfying chunk of roast meat, you begin to truly observe the motley crew that fills the common room. It's a living tableau of medieval life, a snapshot of humanity from every walk of life. At the table closest to you, a group of merchants are animatedly discussing prices and routes, their faces etched with the fatigue of long journeys, but alight with the shrewdness of their trade. Their clothes, while travel-worn, are of finer weave than most, hinting at the goods they carry and the wealth they possess. You can almost hear the clink of coin in their purses, even over the din. Across the room near the door, a group of peasants are huddled together, their attire simple homespun wool, their faces ruddy from a life spent under the sun. Their conversation is more hushed, punctuated by bursts of rough laughter, probably tales of their village, their crops, or perhaps the latest gossip about the local lord. They sip their ale slowly, making each drop last a stark contrast to the more free-flowing consumption of the wealthier patrons. You notice one man, his hands calloused and thick, carving a small wooden figure with surprising dexterity, a quiet moment of artistry amidst the chaos. Further in, by a slightly less crowded table, you spot a pair of pilgrims, identifiable by the scallop shells sewn onto their cloaks, a common symbol of those journeying to holy sites like Santiago de Compostela. They look weary, their eyes carrying a deep-set fatigue, but there's a peaceful resolve about them. They're eating simply, perhaps just bread and cheese, and speaking in low, reverent tones. Historians still argue whether pilgrimage was primarily a deeply spiritual journey or often a convenient excuse for travel and trade, but for these two, the piety seems genuine. And then there are the more unusual characters. Doniparu, minstrel, as you saw earlier, now tuning his lute by the fireplace, his fingers dancing over the strings. He hums a tune, testing the chords, his gaze scanning the room, perhaps looking for potential patrons or a receptive audience. His clothes are brightly colored, a little frayed, but designed to catch the eye. Nearby, a burly man-at-arms, clearly a hired guard or mercenary, sits alone, his hand resting almost casually on the hilt of his sword. His eyes are constantly sweeping the room, alert and watchful, a silent sentinel in the bustling inn. He probably doesn't trust anyone, which you have to admit isn't an entirely unreasonable stance in this era. There's even a friar. His brown habit, simple but clean, sharing a table with a surprisingly well-dressed woman whose delicate features and elegant gown suggest she's a lady of some standing, perhaps traveling with a small retinue that's currently outside. They are engaged in a surprisingly lively debate, though you can't quite catch the specifics. It's fascinating to see such disparate elements of society thrown together, even if only for a night. The inn truly is a melting pot, a temporary neutral ground where everyone from the highest noble to the lowest serf, though you're unlikely to see many serfs with the coin for an inn stay, might rub shoulders. One quirky tidbit: it wasn't uncommon for traveling academics or scholars to also lodge in inns, often sharing their knowledge or debating complex ideas with anyone willing to listen. For the price of a pint, of course. They might even carry precious hand-copied books, a rare sight in an age where printing presses were still a distant dream. Imagine trying to get a quiet read in this cacophony. You lean back, taking another swig of your ale, content to be a silent observer in this grand chaotic play. Each face tells a story, each gesture hints at a life lived on the medieval road. You're not just a traveler here, you're an anthropologist studying the curious customs of a bygone era. As you finish your meal, a quiet satisfaction settles over you. But in a place as bustling and diverse as this, simply existing isn't enough. You quickly realize that medieval inns operate on a set of unspoken rules, a subtle code of conduct that, if ignored, could lead to anything from a frosty reception to a midnight brawl. You observe the ebb and flow of the common room, picking up on these cues. For instance, while it's a public space, outright staring at others is generally frowned upon, especially if you're gazing too long at someone's coin purse. A quick glance, a subtle appraisal, that's acceptable. But lingering eyes invite suspicion. You notice that most patrons keep their voices to a reasonable roar despite the overall volume. Shouting, unless to call for the innkeeper or to settle a very passionate debate, is considered ill-mannered. There's a certain boisterousness expected, a jovial clamor, but a line exists. You also see that space is at a premium. If you leave your bench for a moment, don't be surprised if someone has already claimed your spot upon your return. It's a first-come, first-served world, and personal space is a luxury rarely afforded. You mentally note to keep a close eye on your few possessions, which are currently bundled under your bench. Historians still argue whether medieval inns had formal rules posted, or if these social contracts were entirely informal, passed down through common experience. Your experience suggests the latter. Another subtle rule you pick up on involves the fire. While it's common property, hogging the best spot or blocking the warmth from others is a surefire way to earn glares and muttered complaints. You've seen a few instances already where a new arrival tried to muscle their way into a prime spot, only to be met with a cold shoulder or a suspiciously placed elbow. Sharing the hearth, allowing others to dry their clothes or warm themselves, is a sign of good manners and an easy way to avoid unnecessary friction. It's a bit like navigating a very crowded, very warm subway car. You learn to adjust and share. You also notice the unspoken pecking order. The more well-dressed, wealthier travelers tend to be served first, and often with more deference. The innkeeper, for all his gruffness, is surprisingly attentive to those who look like they have coin to spend. You, as a lone traveler in relatively simple attire, are treated with polite efficiency, neither shunned nor particularly fussed over. It's a clear reminder of the social hierarchy that pervaded every aspect of medieval life, even within the supposedly egalitarian confines of a common room. One quirky tidbit: sometimes travelers would leave a small, earnest money payment to secure their bed for the night, a kind of medieval reservation system, ensuring their spot wouldn't be given away to someone else if they arrived late. The act of drinking also has its nuances. While ale is plentiful, becoming overtly drunk and disruptive is generally frowned upon unless you're part of a rowdy established group. Individual brawls are often quickly broken up by the innkeeper or his staff who have a vested interest in maintaining some semblance of order. A truly chaotic inn would quickly lose its reputation and its clientele. You see a man being gently but firmly escorted out after he started singing a particularly crude ballad a little too loudly. The inn needs to be welcoming enough to draw travelers, but orderly enough to ensure they feel safe. You finish your ale feeling the warmth spread through you. The common room with its intricate dance of human interaction and unwritten laws is a fascinating place. You've managed to navigate its social currents without incident so far, a small victory in itself. As the evening wears on, the light from the fire seems to mellow, casting longer, softer shadows. The noise, while still present, begins to shift, becoming less frantic and more like a steady, comforting hum. You realize that the next challenge awaits finding a place to sleep amidst this lively, perpetually active environment. As the evening progresses, the initial boisterousness of the common room slowly begins to mellow, though quiet is still a very relative term. The flickering fire casts long, dancing shadows, distorting figures into grotesque shapes on the walls. The aroma of ale and wood smoke now seems to cling to everything, a heavy, comforting blanket. You've had your fill of food and drink, and the deep fatigue from your journey is once again asserting itself, a leaden weight behind your eyes. But sleep in this environment, that's going to be a challenge. You brace yourself for the soundscapes of sleep, or lack thereof, in a medieval inn. The initial dominant sound is a cacophony of snoring. It's not just one person or two, it's a symphony of nasal whistles, guttural rumbles, and sudden explosive gas that echo from every corner of the room. There's the thin, reedy snore of an old man slumped at a table, the deep, resonant drone of a burly merchant, and the surprisingly delicate, almost musical snore of what appears to be a sleeping dog under a nearby bench. It's an auditory tapestry woven from the deepest recesses of the human respiratory system, and it promises to be relentless. Beyond the snoring, the chatter continues, albeit in a lower, more subdued key. Some groups are still engaged in hushed conversations, their voices a low murmur that occasionally rises in pitch as a point is debated or a particularly juicy piece of gossip is shared. You can hear the distant clink of a tankard, a few lingering laughs, and the occasional creak of wooden beams as someone shifts their weight. It's a constant low-frequency hum that somehow manages to be both omnipresent and surprisingly easy to tune out if you try hard enough. Or maybe you're just getting used to it. And then there are the animal noises. Remember that stable you saw? Well, it's closer than you might wish. You can clearly hear the soft stamping of hooves, the occasional whinny of a horse, and the gentle lowing of cattle probably housed in an adjoining pen. Every so often, a dog will let out a sleepy bark, or a cat will meow plaintively from some unseen perch. It's a constant reminder that this inn isn't just for humans. It's a shared space with its four-legged residents. Historians still argue whether medieval inns purposefully integrated animals into the main building for warmth, or if it was simply a matter of convenience and space limitation. Either way, you're experiencing the full integrated medieval inn experience tonight. You try to find a comfortable position on your hard wooden bench, perhaps leaning against the wall or curling up as best you can. You pull your cloak tighter around you, hoping its familiar wool will offer some insulation against the chill that slowly creeps in as the fire begins to die down. You close your eyes, trying to block out the flickering light and the relentless sounds. You focus on your breathing, attempting to slow your heart rate to ease your mind into a state of rest. It's a struggle, a battle against the overwhelming sensory input. It's a bit like trying to meditate in a particularly lively barn dance. One quirky tidbit: some medieval travelers brought their own small, foldable wooden pillows or stuffed bags with them, knowing that inn accommodations might be sparse. You silently curse yourself for not having such foresight. Instead, you're left to improvise, perhaps using your bundled cloak as a makeshift cushion. As the night wears on, the sounds might shift again. The persistent hum of conversation might fade into scattered snores and the rustle of straw. You might hear the creak of someone else shifting in their bed, or the soft patter of a mouse exploring the common room floor. It's a symphony of unconscious life, a testament to the fact that even in sleep, the medieval inn never truly falls silent. You drift in and out your mind, attempting to construct a coherent dream from the disparate sound bites of the common room. Despite the constant symphony of snores, murmurs, and the occasional whinny, the sheer exhaustion of your journey eventually wins out. You drift into a fitful, shallow sleep, only to be jolted awake by a startling reality: you're not alone. The medieval inn, in its pragmatic wisdom, rarely offered private rooms to the common traveler. Instead, you're now intimately acquainted with the concept of shared beds, strange company. You stir your muscles stiff from sleeping on a hard bench and realize someone else has settled onto the same sleeping platform, or perhaps even the same large bed as you. This isn't a modern bunk bed situation with personal space. This is often a large straw-filled mattress or a simple pallet laid out in the common room, or a communal sleeping chamber designed to maximize the number of paying customers. You feel the distinct presence of another body, perhaps too warm and surprisingly solid, just inches away. It's a shock to your modern sensibilities, this lack of privacy, this enforced proximity. You might even feel a stray foot nudge your own, or an arm draped across your side as someone shifts in their sleep. It's a level of intimacy you didn't sign up for, and one that requires a rapid adjustment of your personal boundaries. You might hear their breathing, feel the rhythmic rise and fall of their chest, or even, God forbid, the occasional snuffle or cough. It's a truly unique form of human connection, born of necessity and the sheer economics of medieval travel. You wonder who your bedmates are. Are they the merchant you saw earlier counting his coins? The weary pilgrim dreaming of a holy journey's end? Or perhaps the burly man-at-arms, his hand still instinctively near his weapon, even in slumber? You try not to speculate too much, as the answers might be more unsettling than the questions. Historians still argue whether the practice of shared beds in inns was always seen as simply practical, or if there were social implications attached to such close proximity between strangers. For most, it was just the way things were, a necessary evil of travel. Beds often weren't assigned by gender either, which could lead to some truly awkward awakenings. Imagine sharing a bed with a snoring stranger of the opposite sex, both of you fully clothed, of course, but still undeniably there. It's a far cry from your carefully curated sleeping environment back home with your memory foam mattress and Egyptian cotton sheets. You shift uneasily, trying to reclaim a sliver of personal space without disturbing your unwitting companions. The straw mattress rustles beneath you, a surprisingly noisy protest. It's lumpy, often a breeding ground for fleas, and rarely changed. You can only hope you're not leaving with more than you arrived with. The air in the sleeping area, if it's separate from the main common room, is likely still stale and heavy, permeated by the sense of unwashed bodies and damp straw. One quirky tidbit: some wealthier travelers, even if they had to share a room, would sometimes bring their own traveling bed, a kind of portable cot or mattress, to avoid the dubious cleanliness of inn beds. This was, of course, a luxury most couldn't afford, leaving the vast majority of travelers to brave the communal bedding. You find yourself envying those who could afford such a luxury, even as you attempt to find a comfortable hollow in the straw. Despite the initial discomfort, a strange kind of resignation settles over you. This is the medieval inn experience, unvarnished and unapologetic. You close your eyes again, trying to embrace the warmth of your unexpected bedfellows, hoping for a deeper sleep before the harsh reality of morning descends. The shared bed surprisingly proved to be less of a nightmare than anticipated. Perhaps it was the sheer exhaustion, or perhaps the unexpected warmth from your bedfellows, but you did manage to snatch a few hours of fitful sleep. Now, however, the new day is asserting itself with a vengeance, ushering in morning's grimy awakening. The first signs aren't sunlight streaming through a window. Such luxuries are often reserved for wealthier chambers, or simply obscured by soot-stained panes. Instead, it's the shift in the ambient sound, a subtle but undeniable increase in activity that slowly infiltrates your sleep-addled brain. The gentle, almost rhythmic snores of the night give way to rustling and groans as other travelers begin to stir. You hear the creak of bed frames, the shuffling of feet, and the clearing of throats. A sharp, insistent cough from someone nearby serves as your unofficial alarm clock. The air, which felt thick and warm in the dead of night, now feels stale and heavy, clinging to your skin and clothes. The distinct aroma of wood smoke is still present, but it's now mixed with the less pleasant sense of unwashed bodies and yesterday's spilled ale, a potent cocktail that ensures you're fully awake. You push yourself up, your muscles stiff and protesting from the hard sleeping surface. Your clothes, which felt comforting last night, now feel rumpled and slightly damp. You run a hand through your hair, finding it tangled and greasy. This is the unvarnished reality of medieval travel. There's no quick shower, no fresh change of clothes waiting for you. You're simply waking up in the same state you went to sleep, only perhaps a bit more disheveled and decidedly less rested than you'd prefer. It's a bit like camping if camping involved a lot more strangers and significantly less fresh air. The common room is slowly coming to life. Servants are already moving about clearing away tankards and trenchers from last night's revelry. The fire in the hearth, though still glowing, needs stoking, and a scullery maid is already coaxing new flames from the embers, sending puffs of ash and smoke into the air. The faint light filtering through the grimy windows reveals dust motes dancing in the limited shafts of sunlight, a constant reminder of the inn's well-used state. Historians still argue whether medieval inns prioritized cleanliness as much as their modern counterparts, but practicality often trumped hygiene. You watch as other travelers begin their own morning routines. A merchant carefully repacks his wares, checking his coin purse with a practiced hand. The pilgrims, looking as weary as ever, quietly prepare to resume their journey, perhaps offering a silent prayer before they leave. The man-at-arms is already awake, sharpening a dagger with a stone, his eyes scanning the room even in the early light. There's a general sense of purpose, a collective desire to get moving to face the day's journey. One quirky tidbit: some medieval travelers carried a small, often elaborately carved comb made of bone or wood. This wasn't just for vanity. It was a practical tool for dealing with the inevitable tangles and occasional unwelcome hitchhikers, red lice, that were a constant threat in close quarters. You sigh, wishing you had such a comb right now. The notion of brushing your teeth feels like a distant futuristic concept. This grimy awakening is a stark reminder that comfort in the Middle Ages was often a fleeting luxury, not a given. You stumble toward the nearest basin of water, hoping for at least a splash to clear the last vestiges of sleep from your eyes. After the rude awakening, your primary thought shifts immediately to food. Breakfast, if you're lucky, is the next logical step in your medieval inn experience. You shuffle towards the area where food was served last night, your stomach rumbling a more insistent protest than before. The scene is similar, though perhaps a little less chaotic. The innkeeper or his assistant is once again presiding over the food table, which now offers a slightly different, more morning-appropriate array of sustenance. You eye the offerings critically. Gone are the large roasted joints of meat from last night, replaced by what appears to be a large pot of pottage. This is the ubiquitous medieval breakfast, a thick porridge-like stew made from grains, perhaps oats or barley, simmered with whatever vegetables are available, and occasionally, if you're fortunate, a few scraps of meat or some peas. It's hearty hot and designed to fill you up for a day of hard travel or labor. You ladle a generous portion into a wooden bowl, its steam warming your face. The smell is earthy and wholesome, a blend of grains, cooked greens, and the ever-present hint of wood smoke. Alongside the pottage, there are still ample supplies of the coarse dark bread. You break off a chunk, its crust, firm, its interior dense and chewy. This bread is the backbone of the medieval diet, providing essential calories and fiber. You might notice that it's a sourdough type, given the lack of commercial yeast, which adds a pleasant tang. Some inns might also offer cheese, perhaps a hard-aged variety, or even some dried fruit if the season allows. You pick up a piece of the cheese, its salty richness, a welcome contrast to the blandness of the pottage. And of course, there's one pibum. Even for breakfast. As you remember from last night, it's often safer than water and provides quick energy. You hold out your tankard and it's refilled with the same cloudy malty brew you consumed yesterday evening. It might seem strange to drink alcohol so early, but for a medieval traveler, it's simply a part of the morning ritual, a guaranteed source of hydration, and perhaps a gentle way to ease into the day's discomforts. Historians still argue whether the alcohol content of small ale was truly negligible, or if it still contributed to a perpetual state of mild inebriation for many medieval people. You decide not to ponder it too deeply as you take a fortifying gulp. You find a relatively quiet corner, pulling up a stool to a vacant spot at one of the common tables. You eat slowly, savoring the warmth of the pottage and the satisfying chew of the bread. It's simple fare, devoid of the culinary complexities you're accustomed to, but it's exactly what your body needs. There's a certain primal satisfaction in consuming such basic, unadorned food, knowing it's providing the fuel for the day ahead. It's certainly not Eggs Benedict, but it gets the job done. You watch as others eat. A farmer breaks his bread into his pottage, stirring it to create an even thicker consistency. A traveling peddler meticulously cuts his cheese with a small knife, portioning it carefully. There's little conversation, just the sounds of eating. The gentle clinking of wooden spoons against bowls, the quiet chewing, and the occasional sigh of contentment. The shared meal, even in its simplicity, creates a fleeting sense of camaraderie among strangers, a brief moment of shared humanity before everyone disperses for their day's separate journeys. One quirky tidbit: to flavor their pottage, medieval cooks often used readily available herbs like sage thyme or even wild garlic, but spices were rare and expensive, reserved for the very wealthy. So your breakfast is likely robustly herbaceous rather than subtly spiced. As you scrape the last of the pottage from your bowl, you feel a renewed sense of strength, ready to face the next challenge, tackling the medieval inn's answer to personal hygiene. With breakfast providing a temporary reprieve from your rumbling stomach, a new reality asserts itself: the challenging subject of hygiene habits or lack thereof. In a medieval inn, forget your morning shower, your carefully selected soaps, or even the luxury of running water. Here, cleanliness is a far more rudimentary and often public affair. Your first priority is usually a quick wash of the face and hands to at least remove the immediate grime of sleep and the morning's activities. You'll typically find a communal water basin, a large, often wooden or metal bowl, usually located near the kitchen or a designated washing area. Beside it might be a rough linen towel, probably well used and damp, and perhaps a small, hard cake of lye soap. The water itself will likely be cold, drawn from a well or collected rainwater, and may even have a few floating bits of straw or leaves. There's no privacy here. You're washing alongside other travelers, a shared ritual of morning ablutions. You splash the frigid water onto your face, a bracing shock that certainly wakes you up more effectively than any alarm clock. You rub your hands vigorously with the coarse soap, noting its strong alkaline smell, very different from your fragranced varieties. It effectively cuts through grease and dirt, if not leaving your skin feeling particularly soft. Beyond the basic wash, personal hygiene largely consisted of dry cleaning with brushes and cloths. People would brush down their clothes to remove dust and dirt accumulated from the road. You might see a traveler using a stiff bristled brush on their wool cloak, creating a small cloud of detritus. Your own clothes, still bearing the marks of your journey and the previous night's sleep, could certainly use a good beating. You try to dust off your tunic as best you can, grimacing at the faint, lingering scent of stale ale and human effluvium. Hair care is similarly basic. While wealthy individuals might use oils or pomades for the common traveler, it's often a matter of simply combing out tangles with a wooden or bone comb, if you're lucky enough to possess one. The concept of regular hair washing, let alone with shampoo, is practically unheard of. You just try to smooth down the worst of your bedhead, accepting that a truly tidy appearance is a distant dream. Historians still argue whether medieval people were truly as dirty as modern stereotypes suggest, but certainly their standards of cleanliness and available resources were vastly different from ours. One quirky tidbit: to combat body odor, medieval people often relied on frequent changes of their innermost linen layers, which were easier to wash than outer woolen garments. They might also carry small sachets of dried herbs like lavender or rosemary tucked into their clothes. You wonder if any of your bedfellows from last night employed such tactics. The air, while not as stifling as deep night, still carries a blend of natural human aromas. Tooth care. Forget it. The concept of regular brushing is centuries away. Some might chew on aromatic herbs like mint or fennel seeds to freshen their breath or rub their teeth with a rough cloth. But the gleaming smiles of modern advertising are nowhere to be found. You simply rinse your mouth out with a swig of water or ale if you're feeling adventurous, and accept that perfect dental hygiene isn't in the cards. The overall experience is a stark reminder of how far sanitation has come, and you develop a newfound appreciation for your daily hot shower and minty fresh toothpaste. You resolve to make the most of what's available, knowing that the next challenge, the privy, awaits. Having faced the challenges of medieval breakfast and the basic public wash-up, you now confront what is arguably the most daunting aspect of medieval inn hygiene: the privy's perils. There are no porcelain thrones, no flush mechanisms, no scented sprays here. Instead, you'll be navigating the communal latrine, a true test of your medieval fortitude and perhaps your gag reflex. You follow a rough sign or perhaps just the faint, distinct odor, leading you to a small, often rickety outbuilding, usually located at the back of the inn, away from the main common room, but still close enough for convenience. As you approach, the scent grows stronger, a potent blend of human waste and stagnant air. This is not for the faint of heart. The structure itself is often a simple wooden shack, perhaps, with a moon-shaped cutout in the door, or merely a curtain for privacy if you're lucky. Inside, the setup is brutally functional. You'll typically find a wooden bench with several holes cut into it, serving as communal seats. Beneath these holes, there might be a deep pit or perhaps a channel that directs waste into a cesspit or, in less savory establishments, directly into a nearby ditch or river. There's no running water for flushing. Instead, a bucket of sand ash or straw might be provided to be sprinkled down the hole. After use, theoretically, to reduce odor and aid decomposition, it's a largely ineffective measure against the pervasive stench. Privacy is a foreign concept. You're likely to be sharing the space with other patrons, their presence often announced by grunts, sighs, and the sounds of, well, you can imagine. There's an awkward camaraderie in this shared indignity, a silent acknowledgement that everyone, from the lowliest peasant to the most esteemed merchant, must eventually face the privy. Historians still argue whether medieval people were fully aware of the link between poor sanitation and disease, but the sheer practicality of waste disposal often outweighed public health concerns. Your senses are assaulted the moment you step inside. The smell is overwhelming, thick enough to taste. The air is humid and heavy, and the buzzing of flies is a constant, unwelcome soundtrack. You choose a spot, carefully trying to avoid any visible unpleasantness on the wooden seat. You mentally cross your fingers that the structure is sturdy enough to hold your weight and that no unexpected creatures are lurking in the depths below. It's an exercise in holding your breath and moving quickly. For toilet paper, forget that too. You'll be making do with whatever natural materials are available, leaves, moss, or perhaps, if you're truly desperate, a handful of straw. It's a harsh reminder of how much we take for granted in modern times. You quickly learn to appreciate the simple luxury of soft tissue. You exit the privy as quickly as possible, eager to get back to the relatively fresher air of the common room, and perhaps find a cleaner basin of water for another hasty hand wash. One quirky tidbit: some wealthier homes and even castles had garderobes, essentially a more private version of a privy where the waste would often drop directly into the moat or a specially designed chute. While a step up in privacy, the underlying waste management system was often similar to that of the inn, just on a grander scale. As you emerge blinking into the morning light, you feel a profound, newfound appreciation for modern plumbing. The world outside the privy, even with its lingering smells, seems infinitely more pleasant. Having endured the rigors of the privy, you step back into the main inn, feeling a profound relief at being out in the open, relatively speaking. Now, with your basic needs addressed, your gaze drifts beyond the inn's immediate confines. You begin to appreciate the inn not just as a standalone building, but as an integral part of its environment, truly beyond the walls and surroundings. It's often located at a crossroads on a busy trade route or on the outskirts of a bustling town or village. The inn's character, you realize, is often a direct reflection of its surroundings. If the inn is in a rural area, perhaps nestled in a small valley, or by a winding river, its immediate surroundings might be fields of ripening grain, grazing livestock, or dense woodlands. You might hear the distant bleating of sheep or the lowing of cows, a constant pastoral soundtrack. The air, despite the inn's internal aromas, might carry the fresh scent of cut hay or damp earth after a morning dew. This type of inn often caters to farmers, local villagers, and drovers moving their animals to market. The rhythm of life here is slower, dictated by the seasons and the demands of agriculture. Historians still argue whether the location of inns primarily followed existing trade routes or if inns themselves helped to establish new patterns of travel and commerce. On the other hand, if the inn is situated closer to a larger town or city, the surroundings are markedly different. You'd likely see more permanent structures, stone houses perhaps, a church steeple rising above the rooftops in the beginnings of a market square. The sounds would be busier, the clatter of carts on cobblestones, the shouts of vendors, the ringing of a blacksmith's hammer. The air might be thicker with the smoke from numerous hearths and workshops mingled with the smells of various trades, tanning hides, baking bread, brewing ale. This kind of inn would attract a wider array of clientele, merchants with more valuable goods. townspeople, artisans, and perhaps even some minor gentry. Looking out from the inn's entrance, you notice the stable yard, which is a hive of activity even now. Grooms are tending to horses, mucking out stalls, and preparing animals for the day's journeys. The earthy scent of hay and manure is strong but familiar, a foundational aroma of medieval travel. You might see a farrier at work hammering horseshoes into shape, the clang of his hammer echoing across the yard. This area is crucial as horses are the primary mode of transport, and their well-being is paramount to any traveler's progress. Beyond the stable, you might glimpse a garden patch often maintained by the inn itself, providing fresh herbs and vegetables for the kitchen. Or perhaps a small stream where laundry might be washed or water drawn. You also spot a well, its stone rim worn smooth by countless hands. This is the source of all the inn's water for cooking, cleaning, and if brave enough, drinking. One quirky tidbit: some medieval inns, especially those on popular pilgrimage routes, might have had small chapels or shrines attached, offering travelers a place for spiritual solace before continuing their arduous journeys. Imagine finishing your breakfast ale and then popping next door for a quick prayer. The immediate environs of the inn are more than just scenery. They are functional, integral components of the inn's operation and its place in the wider medieval world. You realize that to understand the inn, you must understand the landscape and the community it serves. Having absorbed the wider context of the inn's surroundings, your attention is inevitably drawn to the very practical and essential part of any medieval hostelry: the stable and its inhabitants. This isn't merely a shed, it's a vital, bustling extension of the inn itself, often as busy, if not busier, than the common room during certain times of the day. You head towards the stable yard, the ground beneath your feet changing from cobbled stone to packed earth, mingled with straw and inevitably manure. The first thing that hits you is the smell, a rich, earthy blend of horse hay and dung, surprisingly less offensive than the privy and somehow more wholesome. It's the scent of honest labor and healthy animals. The soundscape here is different too. The soft, rhythmic munching of hay, the occasional snort or whinny, the gentle clinking of harness, and the constant murmur of stable hands at work. It's a symphony of animal comfort and human industry. The stable building itself is typically a long, low structure, often timber-framed, with a thatched or tiled roof. Inside, it's dim lit by shafts of light filtering through cracks in the wooden walls or through open stable doors. Stalls line both sides of a central aisle, each occupied by a horse, or sometimes a donkey or mule patiently awaiting their next journey. You see a variety of equines, sturdy pack horses, sleek riding horses, and perhaps a shaggy pony belonging to a local farmer. Each animal represents a story, a journey, and a crucial link in the medieval chain of commerce and communication. Grooms, often young lads or older, experienced stable hands, move deftly between the animals. They're busy mucking out stalls, forks scraping against stone floors, piling fresh straw for bedding. Others are currying horses, their movements practiced, and gentle, brushing away the dirt and sweat of the road. You see one groom carefully checking a horse's hooves, looking for any signs of injury or a loose shoe. This meticulous care is crucial, as a lame horse could mean a ruined journey for a traveler. Historians still argue whether medieval stable hands were skilled specialists or simply general laborers, but their importance to a successful inn cannot be overstated. You might approach a horse extending a tentative hand. Its soft muzzle brushes your palm as it snorts gently, its breath warm against your skin. You notice its powerful muscles rippling under its coat, a testament to the strength and endurance required for medieval travel. These animals are more than just beasts of burden. They are partners and adventure companions on lonely roads, and a significant investment for their owners. Without them, most long-distance travel would be impossible. One quirky tidbit: medieval inn stables often had small, elevated sleeping platforms or lofts for the stable hands, allowing them to be constantly on hand to care for the animals even through the night. Imagine sleeping just above the horses, the warmth from their bodies rising to comfort you. This close proximity further integrated the stable into the very fabric of the inn, blurring the lines between human and animal living spaces. The stable also serves as a workshop of sorts. You might see saddles being repaired, bridles being mended, or even a farrier hammering out a new horseshoe on a makeshift anvil. It's a microcosm of self-sufficiency, ensuring that the inn can cater to all the needs of its mounted clientele. As you leave the stable, the lingering smell of horse and hay clings to your clothes, a subtle reminder of the backbone of medieval travel and the vital role of these unsung four-legged inhabitants of the inn. Your journey continues, and so does the inn's fascinating story. After your brief foray into the stable, you return to the main building, your mind shifting from the vital practical elements of the inn to its central figure, the innkeeper master of many trades. You've already had a brief encounter with him when ordering your ale, but now you observe him more closely. He's a man of presence, often portly from sampling his own wares, with a booming voice and eyes that miss nothing. He's usually found either behind the ale stand, overseeing the kitchen, or moving through the common room, a constant watchful presence. The innkeeper is far more than just a proprietor. He's the orchestrator of the entire establishment. He's the hot chief negotiator, setting prices for rooms, food, and drink, often haggling with shrewd merchants or discerning nobles. He's the accountant, keeping track of expenditures and income, often using tally sticks or rudimentary ledgers, a far cry from modern spreadsheets. He's the logistics manager, ensuring a steady supply of ale, bread, and meat, coordinating deliveries from local farmers and brewers. You might even see him inspecting a fresh delivery of barrels or sacks of grain, his experienced eye assessing the quality. Beyond the purely business aspects, the innkeeper often acts as a local authority figure, a kind of unofficial sheriff or mediator. He's the one who breaks up brawls, settles disputes between unruly guests, and ensures a basic level of order in his establishment. You might witness him sternly admonishing a drunken patron or deftly intervening in a heated argument between two merchants his authority respected, if not always loved. He has a vested interest in maintaining peace, as a reputation for chaos would quickly drive away custom. Historians still argue whether innkeepers held significant local power or if their authority was largely confined to their own premises. Yet their role as de facto peacekeepers is clear. He's also a news gatherer and disseminator. Travelers bring news from far-flung regions, and the innkeeper is perfectly positioned to absorb and relay this information. He knows who's coming and going, what rumors are circulating, and what major events are happening in the wider world. If you wanted to know the latest gossip from the royal court or the outcome of a distant battle, the innkeeper was often your best source, albeit one whose information might be colored by his own biases or the reliability of his sources. It's a bit like a medieval search engine, but with a much higher chance of misinformation. You watch him interact with various patrons. He offers a hearty greeting to a familiar regular, a stern nod to a new suspicious-looking arrival, and a dismissive wave to a beggar trying to sneak in. He remembers faces, names, and even preferences, a testament to his keen observation skills and prodigious memory. He's a master of human nature, able to read a room and anticipate potential trouble before it escalates. One quirky tidbit: some medieval innkeepers, particularly in larger towns, were also licensed to provide money-changing services, exchanging different currencies for travelers. This added another layer of complexity to their already diverse responsibilities, making them even more indispensable to long-distance travelers. The innkeeper, you realize, is the linchpin of this entire operation, the steady hand that guides the chaotic ship of the medieval inn. He embodies the spirit of hospitality, albeit a rough-and-ready version, in an age where comfort was hard-won and often fleeting. Your respect for his multifaceted role grows with every passing minute. While the innkeeper is undoubtedly the captain of this chaotic ship, he is far from a lone operator. His authority is underpinned by the tireless efforts of your staff and servants, unsung heroes of the medieval inn. They are the unseen hands, the quiet feet, the constant presence that keeps the gears of hospitality grinding, often with little recognition and even less compensation. You begin to notice them more clearly as the morning progresses, a flurry of activity just beyond the main stage of the common room. There are the scullery maids, often young women or older, less fortunate souls whose days are a relentless cycle of washing. They are in the kitchen perpetually scrubbing blackened pots and pans with sand and coarse brushes, their hands red and chapped from the cold, greasy water. They carry buckets of water from the well-haul firewood and sweep floors, their movements efficient and practiced. Their faces are often smudged with soot, their dresses plain and utilitarian, yet their contribution is absolutely vital to the inn's operation. Without them, the kitchen would grind to a halt, and every surface would be covered in a film of grime. Then there are the chamberlains, or chambermaids, responsible for the sleeping quarters. You might see them hauling bundles of straw to refresh mattresses or airing out blankets in the chilly morning air. Their task is often thankless, dealing with the messes left by weary travelers and the ever-present issue of fleas and other unwelcome bedfellows. They move quietly, trying not to disturb lingering sleepers, their efficiency a testament to their long hours and repetitive tasks. Historians still argue whether medieval servants were primarily bonded laborers or free-wage earners, but their daily lives were undoubtedly marked by hard work and few personal freedoms. In the stable you observed the grooms, often strong young men, their hands toughened by handling horses and mucking out stalls. They are responsible for the well-being of the inn's most valuable assets, the horses. They feed, water, groom, and saddle the animals, ensuring they are ready for the next leg of a journey. Their knowledge of horses is often extensive, passed down through generations. They might even act as guides or messengers if needed, venturing out from the inn on quick errands. And of course, the cooks in the kitchen. Often working in cramped, smoky conditions, they are responsible for turning basic ingredients into hearty, if not always palatable meals. You might catch a glimpse of them stirring a large pot of pottage over the open fire or wrestling a whole pig onto a spit. Their days begin before dawn and often end long after the last guest has stumbled to bed, their work fueled by the relentless demand for sustenance. Their tools are simple: knives, wooden spoons, cast iron pots, but their expertise in making do with what's available is impressive. These are the silent engines of the inn, the people who ensure that the ale is drawn, the fires are stoked, the food is cooked, and the beds are relatively ready. They work long hours for meager wages, often sleeping on pallets in the kitchen or stable or in cramped shared quarters. Their lives are intertwined with the inn, a constant rhythm of service and labor. One quirky tidbit: sometimes, if a servant was particularly skilled or had served an inn for many years, they might receive small gifts or a share of the tips from grateful or generous travelers. These small gestures were a rare bright spot in what was often a life of relentless toil. As you witness their constant, uncomplaining efforts, you gain a deep appreciation for these unsung heroes without whom the unexpected comforts of the medieval inn would simply cease to exist. With the morning rituals complete and the inn staff bustling about their duties, the common room begins to fill again, albeit with a different kind of energy. Those who are staying for another day or perhaps waiting for traveling companions now seek out more than just sustenance. This is where you witness the basic forms of an entertainment, simple pleasures, that punctuated the medieval traveler's day. Forget Netflix or even a good book. Diversions here are far more interactive and communal. The most common form of entertainment is undoubtedly storytelling. You might see a minstrel, as you did last night, finally taking up his lute and strumming a melody. He might sing ballads of chivalry and heroic deeds, or perhaps more bawdy, humorous tales that elicit raucous laughter from the crowd. His voice, though unamplified, carries surprisingly well over the remaining background hum. People gather around their faces, captivated by the narratives transporting them from the mundane reality of the inn to worlds of fantasy and adventure. Historians still argue whether these oral traditions serve primarily as entertainment or as a vital means of preserving history and cultural memory. Tonight, it's definitely the former. Beyond the professional entertainer, there's also the spontaneous storytelling among travelers themselves. You might overhear a seasoned merchant recounting a daring escape from bandits, or a pilgrim describing the wonders of a distant shrine. These personal anecdotes, often embellished for dramatic effect, are eagerly consumed by listeners, offering a glimpse into lives very different from their own. It's a bit like a medieval podcast, except the host is live and might ask you for a drink afterward. Games of chance are another popular diversion. You spot a group of men gathered around a table, intensely focused on a game of dice. The clatter of the dice against the wooden table, punctuated by gasps, groans, and triumphant shouts, draws a small crowd of onlookers. Money, or perhaps small goods, change hands rapidly. Card games, though less prevalent than dice in the earlier medieval period, might also be played. It's a quick way to win or lose a few coins and adds an element of suspense and excitement to the otherwise predictable routine of travel. Simpler pastimes are also evident. Some travelers might engage in riddles or wordplay, testing each other's wit and cleverness. You might see someone carving a small wooden trinket or deftly tying knots, demonstrating a practical skill that doubles as a quiet hobby. Chess or a game akin to it might be played by more educated individuals, their faces serious with concentration as they strategize their moves. These quieter pursuits offer a mental escape from the physical demands of the road, and of course the ever-present drinking. While primarily for sustenance, the consumption of ale and cider also serves as a form of entertainment in itself, loosening tongues and lowering inhibitions. You see more than a few patrons whose laughter becomes louder, their movements less precise as the day wears on. It's a communal experience fostering conviviality and breaking down social barriers at least until someone gets too rowdy. One quirky tidbit, some inns might have even offered the rudimentary sport of cockfighting or bear baiting in their yards, though this was more common in larger towns and for a more rowdy clientele. Thankfully, your inn seems to stick to the less bloody forms of entertainment. As the sounds of laughter music and the clatter of dice fill the common room, you realize that despite the hardships of the journey, the medieval inn offers not just respite, but also a surprising array of simple pleasures to pass the time. You've now experienced the warmth of the fire, the taste of the ale, the communal sleeping arrangements, and the simple diversions of the common room. But as with all things, these comforts come at a price. Understanding the cost of comfort in a medieval inn is crucial, and it's far less straightforward than simply swiping a credit card. Money as you know it is a complex beast in this era, and payment often involves more than just coinage. Firstly, you need to consider the coinage itself. There's no universal currency across all regions, so a traveler might be carrying a mix of silver pennies, groat shillings, or even gold nobles, each with varying weights and purity. The innkeeper, the master of many trades, is also a shrewd informal money changer. He'll assess the value of your coins, perhaps weighing them to check for clipping, where unscrupulous individuals would shave off tiny bits of precious metal. You might pay a slightly higher price if your coins are unfamiliar to him, reflecting the risk he takes in accepting them. Historians still argue whether the fluctuating values of local currencies significantly hampered long-distance trade or if established exchange rates made transactions relatively smooth. For you, it's just another layer of complexity. The cost of your stay will vary greatly depending on several factors. A simple spot on the common room floor or a shared bed will be the cheapest option. A private room, if available, and if you're wealthy enough, would command a significantly higher price. Food and drink are usually charged separately or sometimes bundled into a daily rate. The type of food also matters. A simple pottage is far less expensive than a roasted fowl. And of course, the status of the inn itself plays a role. A humble roadside establishment will be cheaper than a grand coaching inn in a major town. Payment isn't always just in coin. Sometimes, especially in more rural areas, or for those with limited cash, payment might involve bartering narai, goods or services. A farmer might offer a sack of grain or a few chickens in exchange for lodging. An artisan might offer to repair something in the inn, or a minstrel might play for his keep, as you observed. While less common for everyday transactions, such arrangements highlight the flexibility and community-oriented nature of some medieval economies. It's a bit like a medieval Airbnb, where your skills might be your currency. You've likely paid for your night's stay and your meals up front, or at least confirmed the general cost with the innkeeper. He'll remember, trust me. There's no complicated billing system or itemized receipts. It's a verbal agreement, often sealed with a nod and the clink of coins. The innkeeper often keeps a tally stick, a notched piece of wood to record debts if a patron needs to pay later, though this is usually only for trusted locals or established merchants. Beyond the monetary cost, there's also the cost of convenience. You're paying for the warmth of the fire, the shelter from the elements, and the security relative as it may be of being indoors among others. You're paying for not having to set up camp forage for food or worry about bandits quite as much. These are intangible comforts but priceless nonetheless after a long day's journey. One quirky tidbit, some inns offered a halfpenny rate for simply sleeping on the floor near the fire, without a bed, perfect for the truly destitute or those who just needed a quick nap before continuing their journey. It highlights the tiered pricing structure and the inn's role in serving a broad spectrum of travelers. As you consider the various expenses, you realize that while your medieval journey is rich in experience, it's also proving to be a rather expensive endeavor, albeit one filled with unexpected grimy comforts. As you settle deeper into the rhythms of the inn, Your eyes, now accustomed to the dim, smoky light, begin to notice the smaller details, the silent stories etched into the very fabric of the building. You find yourself drawn to the walls, to the rough-hewn wooden beams and the plaster between them, where countless travelers before you have sought to leave a mark, graffiti, and lore. This isn't the spray-painted vandalism of the modern world, but something far more intimate and ephemeral, a quiet testament to lives briefly intersecting within these walls. You spot crude carvings scratched into the wooden door frames or the edges of the communal tables. Simple initials often intertwined with a date, perhaps a year or even just the day of the week, reminding you that literacy, while not widespread, was not entirely absent. There are also more elaborate, though still primitive drawings, a rough sketch of a ship indicating a mariner passing through, a simple cross left by a pious pilgrim, or perhaps a stylized animal, a heraldic beast or a farmer's favorite cow. Each mark is a whisper from the past, a fleeting connection to those who sought shelter here centuries ago. Sometimes the marks aren't just names or pictures. You might find a short, pithy phrase, a traveler's proverb, or a brief complaint about the ale. Some things never change, apparently. These are the ancient equivalent of online reviews, though significantly less searchable and far more permanent. Good ale here might be scratched next to a crude drawing of a tankard, or beware the host, carved with a sense of urgency warning future travelers of a less than hospitable innkeeper. These scrawlings become part of the inn's lore, shared among discerning travelers. This practice of leaving marks wasn't always tolerated. Some innkeepers might have actively discouraged it, preferring a clean establishment. But often it was simply part of the inn's evolving character, a low-stakes form of communication between strangers across time. Historians still argue whether these markings were purely individual expressions or sometimes coded messages for specific groups like fellow guild members or secret societies. For you, they're simply fascinating glimpses into the minds of medieval travelers. You might even see evidence of repairs, perhaps a new patch of plaster covering older carvings or a section of beam replaced, erasing some of these historical whispers. But always new marks would appear as each generation of travelers sought to affirm their presence, however briefly, in this transient space. It's a testament to the human desire to be remembered, to leave some small trace of oneself behind, even in the most mundane of places. One quirky tidbit: some medieval inns, especially those on popular routes, kept a guest book of sorts, a ledger where more literate travelers might sign their names or even write a short verse. These were rare and highly prized documents, offering even richer insights into the people who passed through. But for the vast majority, the rough walls and wooden surfaces were their canvas, their fleeting legacy. As you trace a finger over a particularly intricate carving, you feel a strange sense of kinship with the anonymous hand that created it, a shared moment of rest and reflection in the long journey of life. The inn, you realize, is not just a building, it's a living archive of human passage. After contemplating the quiet inscriptions left by previous guests, your mind inevitably turns to a more pressing and often unsettling aspect of medieval inn life: security concerns, real and perceived. While the inn offers shelter, it's far from a fortress, and the very nature of a transient population means constant vigilance is required. You're not just worried about your personal belongings, you're thinking about your very safety. The most immediate concern, of course, is theft. The common room, while bustling, is also a prime hunting ground for petty thieves and cutpurses. Wealthy merchants carry valuable goods and coin, making them prime targets. You saw the man-at-arms earlier, his hand never far from his sword hilt, a silent testament to the prevalent risk. You instinctively check your own small pouch of coins, ensuring it's tucked securely within your clothing, not easily accessible to nimble fingers. Any valuable items you possess are either on your person or carefully hidden within your meager baggage. Leaving anything unattended is a foolish gamble. Beyond petty theft, there's the more ominous threat of bandits and highwaymen. While they typically operate on the open road, a successful inn, especially one known to cater to wealthy travelers, could become a target. You're aware that news of prosperous guests might travel faster than the guests themselves, potentially luring unsavory characters. The innkeeper, as the local authority, would have a vested interest in deterring such threats, perhaps employing a few strong-armed guards or relying on the fear of local justice. Historians still argue whether medieval roads were truly as dangerous as popular tales suggest, or if the risks were often exaggerated for dramatic effect. Still, the fear was very real for travelers. Then there's the issue of unruly patrons. While the innkeeper tries to maintain order, drunkenness and arguments can quickly escalate into violence. You've already seen a glimpse of this, and while most brawls are quickly broken up, you're aware that a stray tankard or an ill-aimed punch could have serious consequences. You try to keep a respectful distance from overly boisterous groups, ensuring you're not inadvertently drawn into their disputes. Your survival often depends on your ability to read the room and avoid conflict. The security of the building itself is rudimentary. The heavy wooden door, perhaps barred from the inside at night, offers a degree of protection, but windows might be unglazed, covered only by wooden shutters, making them less secure. The stable, while vital, could also be a point of vulnerability, particularly for horse thieves. You might notice the innkeeper or his staff making rounds at night, checking locks and listening for suspicious noises, their shadows dancing in the flickering light of their lanterns. Even the shared sleeping arrangements, while offering warmth, could pose a security risk. Trust is a luxury, and you're sleeping mere inches from strangers whose intentions you cannot possibly know. You hope that the presence of other honest travelers acts as a deterrent, a collective security measure. You might even keep a small personal weapon like a sturdy walking stick or a small knife within easy reach, not for offense, but for a last line of defense. One quirky tidbit: some medieval inns employed a watchdog, a large, often fierce dog trained to alert the innkeeper to any unusual activity during the night. Its presence, a low growl or a sudden bark, would be a welcome sound to nervous travelers, but certainly not a guarantee of absolute safety. As the day draws to a close and the common room begins its nightly transformation into a communal sleeping area, these very real and perceived dangers linger at the edges of your awareness, adding a layer of tension to the unexpected comforts of the inn. Despite the lingering security concerns and the general grubbiness of the environment, a medieval inn could surprisingly offer a rudimentary form of care when you weren't feeling your best. Your attention now turns to the healing hand basic remedies available at the inn. Forget the idea of a doctor on call or a well-stocked pharmacy. Medical knowledge was limited, and treatment often relied on traditional practices, superstition, and whatever natural remedies were at hand. If you were to fall ill or sustain a minor injury, a sprained ankle from a stumble on the uneven roads, a nasty cough from the damp and cold, or even just a particularly bad headache, the innkeeper or his more experienced staff might offer some form of assistance. Their knowledge would be born of necessity and passed down through generations, a practical understanding of basic ailments. They are not trained physicians, but they are often the first and only line of defense for a traveler far from home. For a common ailment like a cold or cough, you might be offered a Reunar warm herbal infusion. This would be a concoction of readily available herbs, perhaps chamomile for soothing, or thyme, and horehound for cough steeped in hot water or ale. It might taste bitter and earthy, but the warmth and the perceived medicinal properties would offer some comfort. They might also suggest inhaling steam from a bowl of hot water infused with strong-smelling herbs to clear your nasal passages. Historians still argue whether the effectiveness of these herbal remedies was primarily pharmacological or largely psychosomatic, but their use was widespread. For aches and pains, a mana o poultice ruas might be applied. This is a soft, moist mass of herbs, bread, or even mud applied directly to the skin. For a sprain, it might be a poultice of comfrey or plantain leaves, believed to reduce swelling and promote healing. For a headache, perhaps a compress of vinegar-soaked cloths applied to the forehead. The emphasis is on natural ingredients readily found in the surrounding countryside or the inn's own garden. It's certainly not a painkiller, but the warmth or coolness and gentle pressure could provide some relief. Open wounds or cuts, unfortunately, were more problematic. Lacking antiseptics, the risk of infection was high. The innkeeper might attempt to clean the wound with warm water, perhaps even with ale or wine, which had some antiseptic properties due to alcohol, and then bind it with clean linen strips. For a truly deep cut or a broken bone, the best they could offer was comfort and perhaps a rudimentary splint before advising you to seek a local barber surgeon, a profession that combined haircutting with basic medical procedures, often performed without much finesse or hygiene. You'd likely be advised to rest for a day or two if your purse allowed it. On quirky tidbits, some medieval inns, particularly those on major pilgrimage routes, might have even kept a small stock of snake stones, or bezoar stones, concretions found in the stomachs of animals believed to possess magical healing properties against poisons or various ailments. While utterly ineffective, they offered a powerful psychological comfort to the desperate. So while the remedies might seem primitive, they represent the best available care in an era without modern medicine. The inn, in its humble way, tries to offer not just shelter for the body, but also a comforting hand for its ailments. As the morning wears on and the various tasks of the inn unfold, you might notice odd items being brought forth by the staff, or perhaps discovered by new arrivals. This brings us to the curious phenomenon of your lost and found forgotten goods within a medieval inn. Unlike a modern hotel with a dedicated lost and found box, any forgotten items here would likely be placed in a corner, perhaps draped over a spare bench, or even hung from a hook near the fireplace, becoming part of the inn's temporary decor. The types of items found would reflect the nature of medieval travel and the possessions travelers deemed essential. You might spot a forgotten walking stick, perhaps intricately carved, or a sturdy wooden staff left leaning against a wall. A simple leather pouch, potentially empty or containing a few mundane items like flint and steel or a forgotten piece of dried fruit. You might see a single worn yisirwash, glovernakion, its mate long lost to the rigors of the road. These are the mundane relics of forgotten, hurried departures. More valuable items, though rarer, might also appear. A discarded cloak, perhaps, of good wool, indicating a traveler who either upgraded their attire or simply forgot it in their haste. A small wooden comb, similar to the one you wished you had earlier. Or very occasionally a discarded one eating knife. A personal possession for many medieval travelers, as cutlery wasn't always provided. If such an item was found, the innkeeper would likely hold on to it for a reasonable period, hoping its owner would return. A good reputation depended on honesty, especially with more valuable goods. Historians still argue whether medieval innkeepers were legally obliged to return lost goods or if it was more a matter of professional courtesy and reputation building. Tales of such discoveries would often circulate among the staff and even the regular patrons, becoming part of the inn's local lore. Imagine the hushed whispers about a forgotten purse of silver coins or a small, intricately carved religious icon accidentally left behind by a pilgrim. These stories would add to the mystique of the inn, making it a place where fortunes could be briefly found and just as easily lost again. You might even hear a tale of a traveler returning weeks or months later, hopeful to reclaim a treasured item, and the joyous reunion or bitter disappointment that ensued. Sometimes the found items aren't just forgotten but intentionally discarded. A worn-out boot, a torn piece of clothing, or a broken tool, things no longer useful but too cumbersome to carry further. These would simply be swept away by the staff, destined for the refuse heap, a quiet end to their service. The inn acts as a kind of filter, shedding the worn and gathering the temporarily misplaced. One quirky tidbit in some medieval stories, a lost item at an inn, particularly a distinctive piece of jewelry or a significant document, would become a crucial plot device, leading to quests, mistaken identities, or even uncovering hidden conspiracies. For you, it's just a reminder to double-check your own belongings before you finally depart. The sight of these forgotten remnants emphasizes the transient nature of life on the road and the hundreds, if not thousands, of lives that have passed through these very doors over the centuries, each leaving behind a tiny, often unintentional trace. As you continue to observe the daily ebb and flow of the inn, you notice subtle shifts in its character, particularly in its preparedness and clientele. This brings to light the concept of seasonal changes in adaptations. A medieval inn, unlike its modern counterpart, doesn't simply open or close with a sign. It constantly adapts to the rhythms of the year each season, presenting its own unique challenges and opportunities. During the Hun-ish harsh winter months, the inn becomes a true haven. The fire in the common room burns even brighter and larger, a constant source of warmth against the biting cold outside. Fuel, stacks of firewood, would be meticulously piled high, gathered throughout the warmer months. Travelers would be fewer but often more desperate for shelter. You might see more fur-lined cloaks and hear tales of treacherous, snowbound roads. The innkeeper would likely stock more preserved foods, salted meats, dried fish, root vegetables from the cellar, as fresh produce would be scarce. The focus shifts entirely to survival and basic comfort, a more somber atmosphere prevailing. Historians still argue whether winter travel was primarily for essential purposes, or if some hardy individuals braved the elements for trade or pilgrimage even then. As spring arrives, a new energy permeates the inn. The roads, no longer impassable, would see an increase in traffic. Merchants would begin to move more freely, bringing fresh goods and news from afar. Pilgrims, having waited out the winter, would embark on their journeys. The stable would be busier, and the sounds of bustling activity would return. The innkeeper might begin to offer more fresh produce as new crops become available. The air would lose its heavy, smoky quality, replaced by the lighter sense of damp earth and budding flora. There's a palpable sense of renewed hope and movement. Summer Jersey is often the inn's busiest season. Long daylight hours encourage extensive travel. You'd see a wider variety of travelers. Families perhaps embarking on shorter journeys or wealthier nobles on their way to summer residences. The common room would be packed, and finding a bed might be even more challenging. The inn would rely heavily on fresh produce from its own garden or local farms. Ale would be consumed in vast quantities to quench thirst. The days would be long and hot, and the inn might offer cooler spots in shaded courtyards or even simple jugs of water, though still often less safe than ale. The pace would be frenetic, a constant cycle of arrivals and departures. It's the medieval equivalent of peak tourist season. And then comes autumn, a period of transition. The harvest brings an abundance of fresh food, grains, fruits, nuts, allowing the innkeeper to stock up for the lean months ahead. Travelers might be hurrying to complete their journeys before the roads become impassable with winter weather. There's a bittersweet feeling in the air, a final burst of activity before the quiet introspection of winter. The fires would be stoked earlier, and the atmosphere would grow cozier as the days shorten. One quirky tidbit: some medieval inns, especially those located in areas prone to heavy snow, might even have offered basic snowshoes or temporary sleds for rent to desperate travelers during extreme winter conditions, allowing them to continue their journey even a short distance. These seasonal adaptations highlight the inn's resilience and its integral role in supporting the ebb and flow of medieval life year after year. Each season presents a different face of the inn, yet its core purpose, providing unexpected comfort, remains constant. While you've been immersed in the common bustling life of the inn, your peripheral vision might occasionally catch a glimpse of something different, a hint of a world beyond the shared beds and communal pottage. This is your rare insight into beyond the commoner noble stays. Medieval society was rigidly stratified, and while inns catered to all who could pay, the wealthy, especially nobles, often had very different expectations and accommodations. You wouldn't typically see a lord or lady rubbing elbows with a peasant in the common room, unless their retinue was so vast that only the most public spaces could accommodate them. Instead, a larger inn, particularly one in a prosperous town or on a major road, would have one private chambers, reserved for such esteemed guests. These would be located away from the main common area, usually on an upper floor, offering a degree of privacy and comfort unimaginable to the average traveler. These noble chambers would be a stark contrast to your own experience. Imagine a room with a proper, perhaps even four-poster bed, complete with a straw mattress covered by linen sheets and woolen blankets, and sometimes even a feather-stuffed pillow, a true luxury. There might be a small private fireplace for warmth, ensuring a more consistent temperature than the common room. Instead of shared rushlights, candles, perhaps even beeswax candles, a rare and expensive commodity, would provide brighter, cleaner light. The walls might be plastered and whitewashed, or even adorned with simple tapestries rather than the rough, smoke-stained timber you've become accustomed to. Furniture would be more substantial: a sturdy wooden table, a few proper chairs, and perhaps a chest for storing belongings. These rooms would be cleaned more regularly by devoted chambermaids, and efforts would be made to keep them free of the usual pests. Privacy was paramount, allowing nobles to conduct their business, engage in private conversation, or simply rest away from the intrusive gaze of commoners. Historians still argue whether these private chambers were truly luxurious by medieval standards, or if our modern perception exaggerates their comfort. Yet they certainly offered a significant upgrade from communal sleeping. When a noble family or a high-ranking cleric arrived, their presence would transform the inn. Their retinue, Knights, squires, ladies-in-waiting clerks, and numerous servants would descend upon the inn, often filling the stable kitchen and common room with their own hierarchy and demands. The innkeeper would be exceptionally deferential, as hosting such guests could bring both great prestige and substantial income. Special meals might be prepared, perhaps even using a noble's own provisions if they traveled with a cook. You might catch a glimpse of a richly dressed lady, her gown of fine silk or velvet being escorted discreetly to her private chambers, her face veiled or partially obscured. Or a knight, his armor gleaming faintly even in the dim light, discussing arrangements with the innkeeper, his voice authoritative but polite. These brief sightings are a window into a parallel world of medieval travel, one far removed from your own humble experiences. One quirky tidbit: sometimes a noble's retinue was so large that the entire inn would be taken over for their exclusive use, with common travelers temporarily turned away or relegated to even more rudimentary accommodations elsewhere. It was a clear demonstration of power and status. This glimpse into the noble lifestyle, even from afar, reinforces the deep class divisions of the era and the very different forms of comfort available depending on one's standing. You realize that while your own experience is unexpected, theirs is simply expected luxury. Beyond providing shelter, sustenance, and a glimpse into different social strata, you quickly realize that the medieval inn served another crucial function, one that truly made it a vital nexus in the fragmented world of the Middle Ages. The inn was the quintessential information hub. In an era without widespread literacy, newspapers or instant communication, news and gossip traveled primarily by word of mouth, carried by the very people who frequented these establishments. Imagine the common room as a living, breathing social media feed. Every new arrival brings with them snippets of news from the road they've traveled, reports of the latest harvest, rumors of local lords' alliances or feuds, news of trade opportunities, or grim tidings of bandit activity on distant routes. The merchants, constantly moving between towns, are veritable walking encyclopedias of economic and political intelligence. They share market prices, news of disrupted supply lines, and the latest decrees from regional authorities. Their conversations, often loud and animated, are an open book for anyone willing to listen. Free pilgrims bring news from distant shrines and holy sites, tales of miracles or hardships encountered on their spiritual journeys. They might carry letters or messages, becoming informal postal carriers in their travels. Soldiers, Endhorn, mercenaries, provide updates on skirmishes, troop movements, and the general state of peace or war in different territories. They've seen the world beyond the village, and their stories are often the most dramatic. Even the local, either farmers or either villagers, who frequent the inn share their own brand of news. Local gossip, personal triumphs or tragedies, and predictions about the weather or crop yields. The innkeeper, as you observed, is the undisputed master of this information network. He's a skilled listener, a quiet observer, and a discerning filter of the constant stream of chatter. He absorbs everything, sifting fact from rumor, and often uses this knowledge to his advantage, perhaps adjusting prices based on news of a bumper crop or warning a departing traveler about a dangerous road ahead. His bar or ale stand is effectively the medieval equivalent of a news desk. Historians still argue whether the flow of information through inns was primarily for economic gain, or if it served a more fundamental social need for connectivity in isolated communities. It was likely both. You, as a silent observer, become an unwitting recipient of this constant data stream. You learn about a bridge washed out 20 miles east, hear a new ballad about a heroic knight from a traveling minstrel, or catch snippets of a debate about the king's latest tax levy. It's a spontaneous education, providing a rich tapestry of the wider world that you would never encounter staying within the confines of a single village. It's like stumbling upon the most fascinating, unedited news channel you've ever encountered. One quirky tidbit: some inns, especially those on official royal or church routes, might have even received official dispatches or messengers, becoming designated points for the exchange of critical governmental or ecclesiastical information. The very act of a messenger stopping to water his horse and grab a quick ale would contribute to the inn's status as a vital link in the medieval communication chain. The air in the common room, thick with smoke, and the scent of ale is also charged with the constant, unseen current of information. making the inn not just a place of rest, but a vibrant conduit for the lifeblood of medieval society. Beyond the flow of information and the daily hum of transactions, the medieval inn, in its bustling chaos, sometimes found itself playing a role in the more formal or at least public aspects of medieval justice. Your observations might even lead you to witness aspects of the legal side contracts and disputes. Yeah. While not a courthouse, the inn particularly, its common room served as an informal forum where minor disagreements could escalate and where sometimes they could be resolved. You might see an argument erupt between two merchants over the quality of goods, or perhaps a dispute between a traveler and a local over a perceived slight. These aren't just polite disagreements. They can quickly become heated voices, rising gestures, becoming more emphatic. The innkeeper, as the unofficial authority within his walls, often steps in as the primary mediator. He has a vested interest in maintaining peace as brawls and public disorder detract from his business and reputation. He might use his booming voice to de-escalate the situation, appeal to reason, or even threaten to banish the disruptive parties. His decision, while not legally binding in a formal court, carries significant weight within the inn. Historians still argue whether the innkeeper's role as a mediator was a formal customary practice or simply a necessity born of managing a diverse and often volatile clientele. Sometimes disputes might involve a traveler's debt. If a patron couldn't pay for their lodging or food, the innkeeper might try to negotiate a payment plan or perhaps demand a valuable possession as collateral. You might witness a quiet, tense exchange over such an issue, the innkeeper's face stirring the traveler's face, etched with shame or desperation. In more extreme cases, an innkeeper might even hold a debtor's goods until payment is rendered a form of medieval lien. It's not quite a court injunction, but it served a similar purpose. Beyond the informal resolution of disputes, the inn might also be a place where simple contracts were drawn up or witnessed. Two merchants having just met and discussed a deal might formalize their agreement over a pint of ale with the innkeeper, or another reputable traveler acting as a witness. This could be a simple verbal agreement or perhaps a quick notation on a piece of parchment if either party was literate. These aren't elaborate legal documents, but they carry the weight of a handshake and public acknowledgement in a world where trust was a valuable commodity. You might even see rarely a local bailiff or a representative of the lord of the manor enter the inn not to lodge, but to make an official proclamation to seek information about a wanted individual or to serve some form of rudimentary legal notice. Their presence instantly changes the atmosphere, bringing a hush to the common room as patrons defer to formal authority. It's a stark reminder that even within the seemingly lawless chaos of the common room, the broader legal framework of medieval society is always lurking. One quirky tidbit: some medieval innkeepers, particularly in larger towns, were known to keep a small locked chest or strongbox where travelers could deposit valuables for safekeeping overnight. This offered a rudimentary form of banking and security, a trusted service in an age without formal financial institutions, underscoring the innkeeper's multifaceted role as a pillar of trust in a sometimes treacherous world. The inn, you realize, is not merely a place of rest, but an accidental courthouse, a casual contract office, and a constant stage for the unfolding dramas of medieval life. As you continue your immersive stay, you begin to appreciate how deeply intertwined the inn is with the surrounding economy. It's not just a standalone business, it's a vital part of the local ecosystem fostering crafts and commerce inn's economy. The inn acts as a consistent customer for numerous local trades, creating a ripple effect of economic activity. Consider, for instance, the brewer. The inn's most consistent demand is for ale and vast quantities of it. This means a steady income for local brewers who would regularly deliver fresh barrels to the inn. This in turn supports the farmers who grow the barley and hops necessary for brewing. It's a fundamental economic loop flowing through the inn's taps. You might even see the brewer himself, a burly figure delivering his latest batch, engaging in a bit of jovial banter with the innkeeper. Then there's the baker. The inn needs fresh bread daily, both for its patrons' meals and for the ubiquitous trenchers. This provides a consistent market for a local baker who might operate a large communal oven in the village. The baker in turn relies on the farmers for their grain and the miller to grind it. The aroma of freshly baked bread, occasionally wafting from the kitchen or the stable, is a testament to this vital connection. Historians still argue whether medieval inns produced all their own food or relied heavily on local suppliers, but certainly many elements like bread were often outsourced. The mush butcher warni also benefits greatly from the inn's needs. The inn requires a steady supply of meat, mutton, beef, pork, and sometimes game, for its stews, roasts, and pottages. This ensures business for the local butcher and, by extension, the livestock farmers. You might see a delivery of fresh carcasses quickly moved into the inn's cool storage area or hear the cook haggling over the quality of a cut. Beyond food, the inn supports various craftsmen. The carpenter would be needed for repairs to the inn's timber frame tables and benches. The thatcher, if the roof is thatched, would be essential for regular maintenance and repair of the roof. The blacksmith, the church, would be called upon to mend horseshoes, repair hinges, or even forge new tools for the kitchen or stable. These skilled artisans rely on the inn for consistent work, maintaining its structure and functionality. You might see a carpenter briefly at work replacing a worn plank, his tools clanking softly. The inn also generates ancillary commerce. Nearby vendors might set up stalls knowing that travelers with coin will pass through. You might see a peddler outside the inn selling small trinkets, mending services, or even offering to sharpen knives. The inn's presence stimulates the local economy, acting as a magnet for trade and services that wouldn't otherwise thrive in a purely rural setting. One quirky tidbit, some medieval inns even had small dedicated workshops on their premises, allowing a resident cobbler or tailor to ply their trade and offer immediate repairs or services to passing travelers. This made the inn an even more comprehensive service hub, truly a one-stop shop for medieval, road-weary folks. The inn, you realize, is not just a place to sleep. It's a living, breathing engine of the medieval local economy, a silent but powerful force driving the livelihoods of many. Its constant churn of travelers creates a microeconomy that benefits an entire community. As your stay at the medieval inn draws to a close, a sense of quiet reflection settles over you. You've witnessed the constant comings and goings, the daily routines, and the endless stream of humanity passing through its doors. This experience makes you ponder. The inn's legacy echoes of travelers. For centuries, these establishments have stood as silent witnesses to countless lives, each leaving an invisible imprint on its sturdy walls and worn floors. Imagine the sheer volume of feet that have shuffled across these very flagstones, the endless parade of weary travelers, eager merchants, pious pilgrims, and boisterous soldiers. Each individual carried their own hopes, fears, burdens, and triumphs, all briefly intersecting within the inn's confines. The laughter, the arguments, the hushed confessions, the whispered plans, they've all soaked into the ancient timbers, becoming part of the inn's very essence. You can almost feel their presence, a faint hum of history emanating from every nook and cranny. Consider the stories these walls could tell if only they could speak. The lovers who met here, the deals that were struck, the secrets that were shared over a tankard of ale, perhaps even a birth or a death that occurred within its care. Every creak of the floorboards, every draft from a leaky window seems to carry a whisper of the past. The inn isn't just a building, it's a living archive, a repository of human experience, albeit one without written records or official historians. Historians still argue whether the collective memory of such places contributes significantly to a region's cultural identity, or if individual stories fade too quickly into obscurity. The inn's legacy isn't merely in the grand events, but in the mundane, repeated acts of everyday life. The constant stoking of the fire, the drawing of countless pints of ale, the endless scrubbing of pots, the tending of horses. These repetitive actions, performed by generations of innkeepers and their staff, have etched their own profound mark on the place. It's a testament to endurance, to the human need for connection and comfort, even in the harshest of times. You think of the countless farewells witnessed at these doors, the hopeful departures, the poignant partings, and the uncertain journeys ahead. Each traveler, once refreshed and rested, would step back onto the road carrying the memory of the inn with them, however fleeting. And the inn in turn would stand ready awaiting the next weary soul seeking its solace. It's a perpetual cycle and enduring tradition that connects one generation of travelers to the next. One quirky tidbit, some very old inns still standing today claim to have resident ghosts, perhaps a former innkeeper who couldn't bear to leave, or a traveler whose journey ended prematurely within their walls. While purely anecdotal, these tales highlight the enduring human fascination with the lingering presence of the past and the feeling that these ancient places hold a profound, intangible history. As you sit amidst the sounds and smells of the medieval inn, you feel a profound connection to the countless individuals who sought its unexpected comforts long before you, their echoes lingering in the very air you breathe. As dusk begins to settle once more, casting long, familiar shadows across the common room, you find yourself making a conscious decision you'll stay another night. Despite the shared beds, the pervasive smells, and the constant hum of activity, you've found a strange, compelling comfort in this place. Your body aches less, your mind feels calmer, and the road outside, though it beckons no longer, seems quite so urgent. This choice to seek a second night's respite is a testament to the unexpected embrace of the medieval inn. The routine now feels familiar, almost comforting in its predictability. You know where to find the best spot by the fire, how to navigate the jostle for ale, and which corners offer a semblance of quiet. The faces of the innkeeper and his staff are no longer anonymous. You recognize their rhythms, their subtle gestures. Even the snoring chorus of your fellow travelers has become a peculiar lullaby, a testament to shared humanity rather than a source of irritation. It's a bit like staying an extra night at a very unconventional, very lively hostel. You secure your sleeping spot, perhaps choosing a slightly less drafty corner or a more secluded bench if available. The thought of the straw mattress and the close proximity of your bedfellows no longer fills you with dread, but with a surprising sense of security. There's a primal comfort in being surrounded by others, even strangers, in the dark hours of the night. It's a collective warmth, a shared vulnerability that somehow makes the unknown world outside feel less daunting. Historians still argue whether medieval travelers actively sought community in inns or simply endured it as a necessity. Your current feeling suggests a blend of both. The evening meal, though similar to last night's fare, tastes even more satisfying. You find yourself appreciating the simple, hearty flavors, the warmth of the pottage, and the refreshing tang of the ale. There's a certain gratitude in knowing you have a roof over your head, a fire to warm you, and food in your belly. These basic necessities, so easily taken for granted in your own time, feel like immense luxuries here. You listen to the stories being spun by the fire, perhaps engaging in a brief, cautious conversation with a fellow traveler. The news from distant lands still flows, but now you process it with a slightly detached amusement, no longer feeling the urgency of an immediate journey. You're simply an observer soaking in the atmosphere, allowing the centuries to wash over you. One quirky tidbit: some medieval inns offered special rates for long-stay guests, perhaps merchants waiting for goods, or scholars engaged in local research, effectively becoming early forms of residential hotels. This suggests that the idea of finding comfort and even community in these places for more than a single night was not uncommon. As the common room slowly dims, and the sounds once again shift from lively chatter to the symphony of sleep, you pull your cloak tighter around you, settling into the familiar chaos. The unexpected comforts of the medieval inn have truly taken hold, offering a peculiar sense of belonging in a world so alien to your own. The final morning arrives, marked by the same familiar sounds of stirring coughing and the renewed bustle of the inn staff. But today there's a different weight to the air, the bittersweet anticipation of departure. You've experienced the unexpected comforts of this medieval inn, from the roaring fire to the surprising intimacy of shared beds, from the hearty ale to the vibrant tapestry of human stories. Now it's time to prepare for your final act departure. Fond farewell. You gather your few belongings, ensuring nothing is left behind, recalling the tales of forgotten goods. Your cloak, which once felt damp and heavy, now feels like a familiar companion. Your boots, though still worn, seem to have adapted to the uneven terrain. You make one last visit to the water basin, splashing cold water on your face, the bracing chill now feeling less like a shock and more like a final medieval wake-up call. You head to the ale stand for a last fortifying draft. The innkeeper, recognizing you as a two-night guest, offers a gruff but appreciative nod. You pay your final dues, the coins feeling lighter in your pouch, but your spirit feeling strangely enriched. There's a quiet understanding between you, a silent acknowledgement of the service rendered and the comfort received. You don't need to exchange flowery farewells. The transaction and the shared experience speak for themselves. You take one last look around the common room. The fire, now well stoked, crackles invitingly. New travelers are already arriving, their faces bearing the same weary expressions you had 2 nights ago. The cycle continues the inn, eternally ready to welcome the next wave of humanity. You feel a strange sense of detachment, like an observer who has briefly stepped into a vibrant painting and is now stepping back out. Historians still argue whether medieval inns fostered genuine emotional connections among travelers, or if relationships remained purely transactional. For you, it's a mix, a shared experience that transcends simple commerce. As you reach the heavy oak door, you pause your hand on the cool, rough wood. The scents of wood smoke ale and damp earth linger, a complex perfume that you've come to associate with unexpected solace. The sounds of the inn, the constant chatter, the clinking of tankards, the distant whinny of a horse, fade into a background hum. You step outside into the crisp morning air. The road stretches ahead, familiar once more. But you are not the same traveler who arrived here 2 nights ago. The world outside feels different now. The open spaces which once seemed bleak and daunting now feel expansive and full of possibility. You carry with you a newfound appreciation for simple comforts, for the warmth of a fire, the taste of hearty food, and the unexpected camaraderie of strangers. You face the grime, the noise, and the lack of privacy, and yet you've found a strange, compelling comfort in it all. One quirky tidbit: some medieval inns, especially those run by religious orders, would offer a parting blessing to travelers, invoking divine protection for their journey ahead. While your innkeeper offers no such formal blessing, the warmth of your stay, the temporary reprieve from the harsh world, feels like its own kind of benediction. As you turn to walk away, you glance back one last time at the sturdy timber frame, the smoking chimney, and the welcoming glow from the windows. The unexpected comforts of the medieval inn have etched themselves into your memory, a unique and unforgettable chapter in your journey. The world outside is stirring, waking to its own rhythms. The sun climbs higher, painting the distant hills in soft hues of amber and gold. Your footsteps fall lightly on the path, a gentle rhythm accompanying your thoughts. The sounds of the inn fade into the distance, becoming a soft ambient hum like a half-forgotten dream. Let the images drift, now gentle and indistinct, like smoke rising from a far-off chimney. Feel the quiet settle around you, wrapping you in a comforting embrace. Your journey into the past is complete for tonight. Rest easy now. Let your mind unspool and soften, carried on the faintest breeze of history. There are no more worries, no more bustling common rooms, just the quiet of your own space. Breathe deeply, softly. Let the lingering warmth of the inn, a gentle, unexpected comfort, carry you into a peaceful slumber. Sweet dreams.